Hey, everybody. I'm Jeannie Walters. I am CEO and founder of Experience Investigators, and I spend my time helping organizations understand customer experience and how it can drive business results. And I'm thrilled to be here. And one of the things that I struggle with sometimes is understanding data. Like, how do we slice and dice all those analytics and everything else? We have so much data. And some of the best advice I ever got about looking at data is remembering that we have data already. We have our intuition. We know things already. So sometimes that's enough data to get started. So I hope that helps you.
Just enough data to get started is all we need. Yeah, we already got some. And here we are. I'm so glad to see you, my friend.
I am thrilled to be here, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Of course, absolutely. So, in experience investigators, Jeannie, I remember, gosh, what, 15 years ago, we started hanging out in Chicagoland
Mhm.
at conferences and stuff, and it's morphed a little bit. So, tell me, what's going on with experience investigators?
Yeah, I've been focused on customer experience for about 20 years. I keep saying that, and it's actually over 20 years now. Can you
Wow.
believe that? Crazy. But it's changed so much as like an industry and also just as how people use it, because it used to be this really kind of nebulous thing we talked about, and people still come up to me and they say like, "Oh, that's a soft skill, customer experience." And I try not to have my head explode in front of them. I try to keep that very zen. But essentially, it's a business strategy, it's a discipline, it's a mindset, it's a way to move your business forward. And organizations that miss that, that don't care about that, it's ridiculous. You're missing a huge opportunity to get a return on that investment. And also, like, I love it because we make people happy, right? Like, we improve people's lives by improving the customer experience. So that's what gets me going.
Cool, cool. So, for those that are not familiar with customer experience, I get it. I mean, I've been following you for years and we've been talking about this for a long time, but how do you, Jeannie Walters, define customer experience?
Yeah, a lot of times people think it's one thing. It's customer service or maybe it's customer support, but customer experience is about the end-to-end journey that a customer has with your brand. So that matters before they even become your customer to when they first become aware of your brand, all the way through to when they leave you. And it's about every single interaction they have along that journey with your brand. So it's not about one specific transaction. It's not about reactive customer service. It's literally about that entire relationship. And the formula that I really like is it's perception minus expectation times emotion. And that's because everything around our experiences as customers is based on the expectation that we have. So that means that it is about understanding, like, if I expect a cheap hamburger because I'm in a hurry, that's going to meet my expectations. But if I expect a five-star restaurant experience and they slap a cheap hamburger on my plate, I'm going to be disappointed as a customer. So it's not so much about what you sell and the services that you offer, although that's part of it. It's about everything that supports that entire relationship between the customer and the brand.
Wow. So that's a lot to unpack there. I mean, there's so much there in such a simple equation, right? Perception minus expectation times emotion, and that gives
Mhm.
us our CX, right? So let's start with that first interaction. I mean, a lot of times for an agency or a consultancy or really any business these days, we're finding that website is the first place that they're encountering us, and they're encountering us probably through some search engine, right? They're
Mhm.
trying to find us through Google or Bing or LinkedIn or Facebook. So talk to us about how important that first interaction is, Jeannie.
Mhm. I love this question because really, when we're talking about building a relationship, that starts with the first impression, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of relationship you're building. So, if you are hearing great things, let's say about an agency or about an organization that you want to work with, and it's provided through a word of mouth referral, that's really high. Like, that trust level is really high. And then you go to the website and it looks like it was built in about 2003. And everything feels just kind of clunky and old. Then that is going to chip away at the trust that you already had when somebody gives you that referral. That's going to chip away at your impression of them to the point where maybe you think, well, if this is their website, I'm not going to reach out to them because this is the impression they're putting out to the world. So all of those things are so important. And not only what is it like when you go through that search engine or when you're sitting at your laptop, but of course, we all have our phones handy. And that's what we tend to look at when somebody says to us, there you go. If I said, hey, you should try my friends over at so-and-so, you're going to look them up on your phone right away. And so if your mobile experience isn't up to snuff, then that's another place that people are creating those impressions of you from the very beginning. And at any interaction point, you're either building or eroding trust. And so remembering that can really drive that perception of we've got to get this up to, our standards, because otherwise, what are you putting out to the world?
Yeah, that trust is the currency that powers these relationships and drives people to invest with you. And it's so good that you talk about the mobile experience, because I think, it's often the last thought, but often should be the first thought. I mean, to your point, right? If I'm searching for you, how do you show up on my phone, right? On this little 4-inch screen,
Yeah.
not sideways anymore, which is interesting, right? We used to talk about, oh, well, all video, people watch it like a TV. And I don't think so anymore. I think people are more like they're squatting, like they're maybe watching it somewhere else, right, Jeannie?
Yeah, we won't say where.
No.
But yeah, I think all of those things, and one of the things I focus on a lot, because sometimes when we talk about customer experience, it's really easy to think that we know, to think that we understand our customers' experience from the inside out. And we say things like, oh, our customers love us. Everybody says this to me when I first start working. They say, oh, you don't understand. Our customers love us. And yes, you have customers who love you. But we also have to remember, think about your worst customer on their worst day in the worst situation. And if you can serve them in that moment, if you can solve their problems, then you can solve problems for all of your customers. So to your point about the mobile, like let's say I'm on a bus and I'm trying to look something up and I'm, between people and there's somebody in front of me and there's just not a lot of room. And I want to hold this really securely. So I'm on a bus. I don't want to flip it around. I'm going to be holding it like this. So if you can literally think through your customers' real lives like that and think through what are the scenarios where they're actually interacting with our brand, then that helps you kind of open up the scope of what experience really is and how you can provide them what they need in the moment that they need it.
Yeah, that just-in-time experience. That's a good reminder. So when we think about that, let's talk about something that I think a lot of agencies and a lot of consultants get wrong, and that is advertising and their customer experience there, right? They advertise, they invest money in a LinkedIn ad or a Facebook ad or a Google ad or a Bing ad or a YouTube thing, and they advertise so generically that when you get back, you're like, well, this doesn't solve, right? I mean, the endpoint is so generic that it didn't solve anything. I mean, I've actually seen people that advertise their homepage as their landing page for their ad. So why is that just wrong, Jeannie? Why is that just wasted money? And how can we improve that experience?
Well, I think, again, we have to think about the whole journey. So advertising is essentially saying, here's what we promise you. And here's what it's like to work with us. And if you get that wrong from the beginning, then you're basically setting up that customer experience equation to be bad. Because if you are setting expectations that basically you're not able to live up to in your customer experience, then that's something that can really, disappoint people in the future. So that's the first thing I'll say is like, make sure you actually are setting expectations that you can live up to. And to your point about like driving to a generic place or driving action based on a very generic call to action, that's something as well that you want to attract the right customers into your field, right? We cannot appeal to everybody. Phil, even you and I cannot appeal to everybody somehow.
No way.
I'm not sure how, but and that's okay because the right people will attract themselves to us, right? Like we have to put the right thing into the world so that we get those customers. Because the other side of this is if you don't know who you are as an organization, and if you don't know what your vision and values and all of that, if you don't have that really clear, then you're going to attract the masses who will then say, wait a minute, this isn't what you promised me, or these values don't align with mine. But if you get that part right and you really put it out to the world in the right way, then you get the right customers who are more than willing to pay for the experience of working with you, because they're like, this feels right. This is, I see you, you are living up to your promises. And guess what? My values align with yours. And so we make a great team. That's what we want to
Aw-
attract.
Yeah, right. So it's not enough just to solve a problem anymore. We
Right.
have to really make sure that our values are aligned with that as well. And we see brands are still hesitant to go in with their value, right? They're
Mhm.
still, or they don't display that. I mean, I can count, on all my hands and fingers the number of brands that actually take the time to live their values, right? And put
Mhm.
them out there in meaningful ways. I mean, they talk about, maybe philanthropy is important to them, and then they don't do anything philanthropic. Or they
Yep.
talk about diversity, right? They talk about how important diversity and inclusion is as a value, and then you go and you look at their board of directors, they're all old white guys.
Yep.
It's like that's no. There's a total mismatch there. So
Yep.
how do we help? I know that this is what you do. So how do we make sure that these brands get that alignment? I mean, do you have some stats or some figures, Jeannie, that you found that are
Mhm.
really helpful in persuading executives?
Yeah, there are a couple things. One is, our perception as people in the organization, it's usually wrong. And the only way we know that is by actually collecting feedback and asking our customers what they actually think and believe. And too often we just don't do this part. We just skip it. And so we need to commit as part of our value to giving customers a seat at the table. And we need to make sure that their voice is being heard. And the only way we can do that is having a consistent and truthful, honest feedback program. So if you don't have a voice of the customer program, I would encourage you to look at how can we do that. The other thing I'll say is that, generations coming up right now, they are all in on these values. They will only work with brands that they really believe align with their values, and they are willing to call out the brands who don't. And so, to your point, all the greenwashing and pinkwashing and all that stuff that's been happening, where they make these big statements, they put things on Twitter, and then to your point, you look at their board of directors, or you look at some of their practices, some of their supply chain practices, even. I mean, people are looking for that level of transparency and honesty and authenticity. And so, if you cannot live up to that, you have to talk about the plan. You have to talk about, here's what we're doing, because we recognize we're not living up to that. And I'm a big believer in something we call the customer experience mission statement. And this is where you take, what is your brand promise? What are the values that you have? How do you put that out? And how do you show up no matter where you are on that journey with your customers? So it's not just about the products you sell, it's about how are you answering the phone? How are you interacting within your organization to one another? So if you say your value, for instance, is authenticity, and then every time you go to a group meeting in your organization, everybody's fudging the numbers on their status reports because they know the boss is going to get mad. That's not being authentic. And it has to come from the inside out. So when I talk to leaders about this, I share things that have happened to me personally as a customer where, one of my favorites is I show a little yellow card where I was on this preferred list for rental cars, because back when we could travel, I was doing that a lot, right? So I had all the statuses, and I went to get my car and they didn't have it, and it was this one thing after another. It was like in row Z 2600. It was all the way across the parking garage. And I get there and there was a yellow card on my driver's seat that said low priority. And I just looked at that and thought, wow, that sums it up, doesn't it? Like, now clearly that was not meant for me as the customer to see, but that's my point. Everything inside the organization does get out to the customer at some point. And now there is no barrier. So let's embrace that. Let's say this is who we are. This is who we are no matter where we are. And this is always how we show up. And so the customer experience mission statement is something that we have a whole workbook on it on our site at yearofcx.com, because we have all these downloadable resources. They're totally free. And it helps you kind of think through, okay, now that we know what people want, how do we align that with who we are in a way that is both valid and valuable to our organization? So there are tons of ways to do that. And that's actually Year of CX without the V. Sorry.
Oh, my fault. I'll fix
No
that. So
worries.
Year of
I appreciate
CX.
it.
Yeah, for sure. So, yep, trying to get that on just in time there. So
Thank you.
awesome. Yeah, for sure. So that's so interesting, Jeannie, that low priority. How does that? I mean, that obviously fish think from the head down, right? That starts at the top of the organization,
Yeah.
who says, we have a value for each customer, and we really don't care about these customers that maybe spend $23 on a rental. If you're not
Mhm.
spending 57, or you don't have, a whole organization lit up about this, we really don't care about you. You really are no priority. Or the miss on the whole phone, your call is very important to us. 13 minutes of hold. So talk about some of those other misses, and
Mhm.
how, frankly, how that really hurts a brand and hurts an agency and hurts a consultancy.
Well, I think again, this all comes down to trust, doesn't it? I talk a lot about this idea of micro moments, which are these small moments along the journey that either build or erode trust. And what tends to happen is, because we're always prioritizing in business, we're always saying, we've got to work on these 20% things that are going to give us the 80% return. And we're always thinking big and we're always thinking long term, that we kind of shrug our shoulders at a lot of little moments. We say, well, that's how everybody else does it. That's what nobody cares. Nobody complains about this. But if we spend a little extra time, and I think this is so powerful for agencies and consultancies specifically, because we want those to be long-term relationships, right? We want those to be, something that feel like a long-term partnership. And so if we can show very early on in the relationship, maybe during the pitch phase, but we all know that's kind of all bells and whistles, right? And we've all been through this, where we get all the bells and whistles, and then we start working with them and it's like, wow, this is not what I expected at all. Where did all that attention go? They never answer my calls anymore. So thinking through, what are those moments that really matter? And in a long-term relationship, the trick is you kind of have to create those proactively, because neglect seeps in. Neglect happens. Think of any relationship you have. It takes 12 positive experiences to overcome one negative one in any relationship you have. And that's because we have this emotional bank that we need to make sure that we are collecting those positive experiences, so that when things go wrong, because they will, we have enough trust and emotional investment that we can overcome those things together. And the best brands who do this really well, the elite brands, they provide 22 positive experiences for every one negative one. And that's because they're doing it proactively and they're doing it intentionally. So I would encourage you to look at little moments along the journey that are neglected. In you brought up a great example of the hold message. I also love to talk about invoices, because we often treat invoices like they're not part of the actual customer experience. And yet in some relationships, that's the only consistent communication we have with the client. We send invoices every month like clockwork, or whenever we invoice. And the minute we woo them, we get them with all these promises. The first invoice basically says all the ways that we're going to send them to jail if they don't pay us. That is a moment. That is something we can look at and think, how can we transform this? How can we make it a positive touch point? How can we change it up a little bit every time, so that we're acknowledging, what, the work is different. We're doing different things for you, even if it's the same retainer model or whatever. But I blame, when everybody got Microsoft Excel invoice templates and it says, thank you for doing your business for your business. Like, take that off your invoices. Just take it off. Come up with something personal and creative and more about the actual experience. And if you can do that, if you can start intentionally putting those moments into your journey, then when you have those hiccups, you have the trust, you can build off of it, and you can overcome it together.
Wow, I love the idea of making those intentional. I think that's so important. And invoices, I would also say, to your point about the whole sign up process too, your contracts. I mean, a lot of
Yep.
the organizations that we do sales operations for, we look at their contracts. I mean, one was like 20 pages long.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like nobody wants to read that stuff. And what you're doing is you're inviting the lawyers to get involved and to get between you and your customer and creating a potentially a negative experience, or at least a neutral experience instead of a wow experience. So
Hmm.
I dig the fact that you said invoices make them a special. I do my best, even on the recurring ones, to try to add something a little bit different to
Yeah.
each one. Like, hey, I really enjoyed our time together this month. I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to great things next month or something like that,
Yeah.
because that does make a difference. I mean, people read that, and if you just send sadly, the other thing is if you just send the default, it often ends up in spam.
Yep.
So
Well,
now you're not going to get paid.
and I think the other part of this, sometimes people say, yeah, I'm sending it to AP. They don't even know me. Yeah, but they will know you if you're talking to them every month. And you know what? Why not have them have a little bit of a positive experience so that when your brand name comes up in a big organization, they can say, oh, yeah, I've interacted with Jeannie. She's really nice. Or she sends me a note every month or whatever. Those are the types of things. No matter who we're dealing with human beings. And we have to remember that. We have to connect emotionally. And if we don't do that, if we don't take the opportunity to do that, then we are turning everything into a transaction. And transactions can be, overlooked. They can be something that we go, did I get my value or not? It's very black and white. Instead of these relationships that we're building that, are more nuanced, that are about partnership, are about being that trusted advisor, all of those things. And so I really encourage people to think about their journey differently and think about what can we do to make it a little better. And, contracts are a big one. And sometimes the sales cycle, it takes forever to get something done. And then we finally get to a place where it's officially official. And instead of celebrating that moment, instead of saying, oh my gosh, we're so thrilled to work with you, we say, whew, okay, so the next steps are I'm going to send you a spreadsheet and we just kind of move on. And so looking for moments of celebration, that can be really powerful too.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that sales cycle being part of your customer's experience. That's an awesome reminder, right? Every piece of that, even after the sale
Oh,
is
yeah.
complete, right? That handoff is so important. So Teresa mentioned here, she says, I try to fill in the contract with the customer over
Love
a
that.
coffee. And I love that. That's really great, right? I mean, or whatever they like. That's the other thing, Jeannie, that you mentioned about being intentional is if I find out what you drink, like, I don't know if you know this, Jeannie, I'm actually lactose intolerant. So I can't have cream in my
I
coffee, but I
didn't know
like
this.
oat. Yeah, but I like oat milk. So this morning, right, I got a foxtail coffee with just a splash of oat milk. But if you didn't know that and you bought me a coffee and you
Yep.
sent me regular cream, I would be grateful, right? But I'd be like, yeah, if I
Hmm.
drink this, it's gonna hurt my stomach. They didn't really ask. Yeah,
Yep.
they don't. Like, and then the doubt creeps in, right? The doubt is like, oh,
Yep. You've got to know your customer.
yeah, right. Knowing your customer is so important,
Hmm.
and finding ways and reasons to celebrate. This is such a good thing, right? I think one of the things that I've tried to do is celebrating people's birthdays, right? I try to
Hmm.
make a phone call or send a video or send a text or the highest touch that I can make on people's birthdays. Now, sadly, Facebook and LinkedIn have not done a good job of alerting them, so I'm trying my best to add them manually back to my calendar because they used to, right? They used to do that every day, but now it's harder, so it takes more effort, which is fine, right? But that's a celebration or finding out what is their most important day,
Hmm.
right? What is their most important day? So, Jeannie, what about you? What's your most important day, and how do you celebrate it?
Wow, what a good question. Um, I don't know. I think I have a couple actually. I do. Uh, I've got two kids. I get really excited about their birthdays and their milestones. And then I also, there's the celebration every year of like, oh my gosh, I've been in business how long when I get to my business anniversary in July. And those types of things are really cool. And what I love about what you just said there is how important it is to really know your customer because one of the things we're seeing in data over and over again is that as the world changes, expectations shift as well. And so your customers expect to be known and recognized wherever they are on the journey and wherever they interact with your brand. So in an agency model, it's really important that the person who maybe answers the phone understands that, Phil lives in Florida and is lactose intolerant. Like, that is what we want to know. We want to have a place to collect that information, to share it, so that no matter where they interact, they feel like, wow, this company really knows me. This brand really knows me. And what I love to do, as you know, I live in Chicago. I love Chicago. I'm a Chicagoan through and through. And so sometimes what I do is I send very Chicago things to people after I've spoken to them, simply because it's part of me. It's part of who I am. And, Chicago pizza is very popular, but not everybody loves it. And so I listen for those cues. And, one client we sent a Chicago hot dog set for, because he admitted, he said, I don't really like the pizza, but man, those hot dogs. And so I was like, ding, ding, let's go ahead and do that. So I think sending something that really represents you, that is a welcome, can be really powerful as well. But looking for those moments to do things like that can be really special. And I have been the recipient of Phil happy birthday calls. So thank you for those, Phil.
Of course, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, so to your point though, but the connection between me and you, between you and the business, right? What you care about and what I care about are really important, right? If I'm a service provider for you, you want to stick that in our brain. And I also heard you say we should make a note of that. And I would say the best way to do that is to make the CRM available to everybody who touches your customer,
Yep.
right? We think of that as customer relationship management, but we just use the acronyms and we forget what the heck they really mean.
Yep.
But a real CRM has things like Jeannie loves Chicago. So therefore do things related to Chicago for Jeannie. And to that point, right, I love baseball. So finding a way to connect that to you, right? And you're a Cubs fan, if I remember, right?
I am.
So finding a way to connect that, or to kind of tease you and maybe send you some Brewers gear and say,
Yep.
maybe, right, next time I'm in town, I'll wear my Brewers hat and you can wear your Cubbies hat and we can go to the game together, right? So we can make that experience even better and more memorable,
Yep.
which is really, really important. So Jeannie, let's flip just a smidge here to larger organizations. Michael Garrettson is a guy. He used to live in Portland. Funny enough, he moved. He's not far from you now, I want to say, in Illinois. And he wants to know, in large organizations, right, as we traverse through different teams, how do we make that happen? We said the CRM, but what are some other suggestions for you, Jeannie?
Well, first of all, you have to understand your customer's actual journey. And often what we do is we think we understand, but what we understand is our process, how we believe we're moving the customer through. And we even say things like this. We say, well, then they go from marketing to sales, then they go from sales to account management. But that's not actually what's happening for the customer. So the first thing I would recommend is making sure that you understand the customer journey. The best way to do this quickly is conducting a customer journey map workshop and then translating that into a journey map. We have resources for you on the site, again, at yearofcx.com. We have a downloadable journey map, interactive journey map template you can use, as well as a workbook around that too. But essentially what that does is it helps everybody in your organization understand this is actually what's happening for the customer. Then you can start looking for, okay, where are their pain points? Where are the points where we need to communicate better inside our organization to provide that seamless experience? Where are the places where it's breaking down, as well as where is it working really well? And where are those high points for the customer? How can we create more of those throughout the journey? So a CRM, just like Phil was talking about, is super important because that's where you collect things. You want to make sure you have a centralized place for that customer data, but then you also want to apply that to the customer journey overall and make sure everybody's speaking the same language, so that if somebody, and I do work with really large organizations, global organizations, they have lots of challenges around this. But the best brands out there start with the customer in mind. So instead of kind of retrofitting the customer journey into their processes, they take that customer journey and they translate their processes, their systems, their people, how they train people, everything into that customer journey. So it's customer led, not product led, let's say. And so there are so many ways to do this, but I think, starting with that journey, understanding where those pain points in, and then designing around that can be a really, really powerful thing to do.
Awesome. I dig that. And getting actually in front of your customer and seeing what they see is so
Yep.
important. Simple things like opening up an incognito browser so that if they search for you, what does that really look like? How does
Yep.
that feel? What are those touch points, right? If you're already connected to your customer, that's great, but find someone who's not already
Mhm.
connected to your customer. That first time they're looking, I would even say when you're sending out those newsletter emails, send them from a person
Mhm.
instead of even if you just have the person's name. It doesn't
Yep.
necessarily have to be from my email, but from my name, right? So that they identify with that. I know organizations used to think that it was good to make up someone's name, but now people are looking for someone they can trust to get information from. Are you finding that too, Jeannie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we are also living in an age where technology is getting a little too smart for its own good sometimes. And so we send these emails and we assume that they go through. We assume, to your point, that like, oh, we've optimized our search and so people are finding us. That might not be the case. And there was one, client situation where I worked on where they had so many emails going out and they couldn't figure out what was happening. And just by testing that, what we realized was there were duplicates going out, there were things getting skipped. And so customers just didn't trust the email anymore. So they were just not opening them. They were putting them all in spam. And so it was happening both automatically and because of the experience they didn't know they were delivering. And so by not checking on those very things that you're talking about, then you're assuming that your processes are working the way that you think they do. And they aren't. I'll say that there are places in your processes that are not working the way you think, or the customer is not believing them or not interacting with them in the way that you think. And so, sometimes we spend so much time thinking through the inside of our operations and we spend so much time with process mapping and we put together all these flow charts and we have reorgs and all of these things, and we do all of that with blinders on about what is actually happening to the customer. So then we just announce things to the customer and we say things like, how you've built a huge relationship with this salesperson over 3 years. Well, now that you did exactly what we asked you to do, we're going to assign you to this group that you've never heard of, to this person who you have no relationship with. And you are not only assigned to that, but if we really don't want you to call that salesperson anymore. That person that you trust, that person that you have a relationship with, just lose their number. And it's such a backwards way of thinking because the customer is thinking, well, I don't know who this person is. I've got to look up a new number. I've got to figure all this out. And it's all on them. But it's our process that we're shoving them through. And sometimes I call this journey mapping by org chart, where we literally move people through our org chart instead of thinking through their actual process. So it's so important.
Wow. Wow, that's I've always known that it's bad to just kind of shuffle salespeople, but I sometimes forget how important it is to make that clean handoff, right? Because it's almost like when I introduce someone, right? My trust goes on to the person I'm introducing,
That's right.
and it's almost like sharing the light. It's like, okay, light went from I'm the leprechaun to now I'm shining it on Jeannie, right? And now Jeannie has my light, and now Jeannie can take the light, and now she
Mhm.
can make silly faces like me, and now she can pass it to the next person. But if we don't do that,
Yep.
it's almost like, well, did Phil get fired? What happened here, right? I mean,
Yep.
why did you do that to us? What's going on? And now we have start to your point. I mean, it does erode trust.
It
So
does.
so talk to us more about that all important handoff.
Mhm. Well, I would think about it not as a handoff. I would think about it as the next phase of a relationship. And so if you are, um, I think, sometimes we think about these things in a very linear way. I like to think about them. almost like a Venn diagram, right? There's so much overlap between these phases. And we have to remember that part of what we're doing in that handoff is creating a comfort level. We are basically saying to the customer, you know what? We know that you have lots of questions. I mean, the minute somebody signs a contract, buyer's remorse starts setting in. The minute they do, because it's a huge decision. It's a huge decision that they are going to struggle for the first 90 days to justify what they just signed, both in their hearts and heads as well as within their organization. So we have a responsibility in that first phase of the new part of the relationship to reassure, to reinforce that we're going to keep those promises, and to basically make them feel like they absolutely made the right choice. We are there for them. We are their partner. So if we basically say, thank you for signing, here's your account manager, and we make it a transactional thing, we're already kind of disregarding what has happened in their mind. They are putting their trust in us in that moment. And so I would say look for, where are those places where there is a natural overlap that you can reinforce that this is just the next phase of the relationship, that you are going to support them in that especially early phase, which can be kind of painful. Like, let's acknowledge that, and let's reassure and reassure and reassure. So sometimes what that means is, yes, we set them up with their new person, their new team. They're going to help them with the implementation or whatever we're selling. And then the salesperson who they have that relationship with is there for the first meeting, is checking in proactively with the client, saying, hey, I'm just checking in. How are things going? Or if they know there's an issue, if they know there's some sort of hiccup, calling proactively again and saying, hey, I heard there was a hiccup. This is what the team is doing. I just want you to know that they have my full faith. I totally believe in this resolution. Small things like that. Because to your point, you said it beautifully. Like, you're basically saying in this introduction, I'm putting my credibility and the trust that we've built into this introduction. So make sure we back that up, that we don't make it feel transactional and like, okay, I'm done with you. I got my commission. Good luck. And we just have to think about it more as a relationship.
You paid me, now get out of my
Yeah.
life. Yeah, that's
Godspeed.
that right. Yeah, yikes. Yeah, so much good stuff there, Jeannie. I really value that, and I really, it's just good reminders to focus on that overlap and to make that really strong, right? To
Mhm.
almost like arm to arm, right? We want to go in there and make that super strong. So
Yeah.
you gave us, wow, you gave us so much, and you mentioned yearofcx.com that's got 24 different resources. So tell us a couple of those that are going to come up so that
Mhm.
we can be ready for them as they come.
Yeah. So we've got, I don't know how many we have released already, but the idea was every year in October, there's CX Day. And so we started this on CX Day 2020, and it will go all the way through CX Day 2021. And you can sign up and get these downloadable tools that can help you think through things like your customer experience mission. We have something called a experience success statement, which is how you tie your customer experience goals to your organizational goals and how it can drive those results for you. We have that interactive journey map. We have something called SMIRC goals, which are a clever way to outline your CX goals. We have things coming up in the next couple months here around voice of the customer program and how to develop that, some more employee experience resources. Like, how do you hire and onboard people who can deliver on your customer experience mission? We have to tie all of those things together in order to make customer experience part of what we do. And if we want to be a customer centric organization, we have to weave it all the way through, from our employee experience and our culture, all the way through to our business results, all the way through to how we collect feedback from our customers and what we do with it. So it's a whole process around customer experience and the mindset and the shift and everything else. And we've been having a lot of fun, and we've gotten some great feedback. So we would welcome anyone to sign up for that.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome, Jeannie. So as we close here, I'm going to ask one more question here as we go out. We know, folks, go to experienceinvestigators.com to learn more from Jeannie and her team there, and go to yearofcx.com to get all those resources. But Jeannie, what the heck is a SMIRC goal?
So the Funniest part is it's spelled wrong because it's spelled SMIRC. And that's because when I first was putting together, what's important about customer experience goals specifically, because I'm on this mission where we talk about customer experience and we say things like, well, create an exceptional customer experience, but we never define that. And then in a year, we look back and go, I guess we didn't do that. So I guess customer experience doesn't work. Okay. And that's not true at all, but you have to define it. So SMIRC goals are social, measurable, inspirational, relevant, and contextual. And so we outline what each of those means, but it's really about getting leadership buy-in and making sure that it connects with other goals and make sure that it is inspirational, because everybody in your organization, whether they are customer facing or not, every single person needs to be on board with customer experience, because you're all delivering customer experience, even if you never talk to a customer.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that, Jeannie. Well, experienceinvestigators.com is the place. Get to know Jeannie Walters. She is brilliant. Thank you so much, my friend, for spending time with me today. Thank you to all these commenters who left some great stuff here. Michael Garrettson says it best here: in a cold, dark, customer agnostic vacuum, you're giving me a candle. I look forward to checking out your website to see if I can upgrade to a pen light. So
I love it. I love it, Michael.
that's
You're
awesome.
on your way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So check that out. And Jeannie, once again, my friend, thank you so much for being
Thank
with me
you.
today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you.